with a very discreet, reptilian, cold-blooded.
We got a lot of work to do. I don't even need you to get me elected. I need you once I'm elected. Secondly, we're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our the President Obama's administration.
You can't say it, but you know it's true.
Before this, we have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
No, and I think some people are missing something here. The president has put in place an organization that contains the kind of database that no one has ever seen before in life. That's going to be very, very powerful, and whoever...
But as all of you know, understanding and innovating with data has the potential to change the way we do almost anything for the better.
And that database will have information about everything on every individual in ways that it's never been done before, and whoever runs for president on the Democratic ticket have to deal with that. They're going to have to go down with that database and the concerns of those people because they can't get around it. And he's been very smart. I mean, it's very powerful what he's leaving in place. And I think that's what any Democratic candidate is going to have to
For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country.
And report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that... I've said this before. People would ask me, knowing what you know now, do you wish like you had a third term? And I used to say, you know what, if I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony. Wow. I'd be fine with that because I found the work fascinating. I mean, I write about even on my worst days, I found puzzling out, these big, complicated, difficult issues, especially if you were working with some great people.
Want a serious crisis to go to waste.
The U.S.'s democracy has been downgraded 3 times since 2016.
I am listed as a domestic terrorist. You have 48 hours to get your information and you're gone.
Whoever wins those elections can basically do whatever they want.
If you want to fight against the country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun.
The people who tend to start civil wars are the groups that...
In terms of the Organizing for America, that he's now shifting to become a 501c4.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The National Committee is rushing to overhaul its data storage operation ahead of the 2020 presidential election.
The party has used a system called Vertica to store crucial voter information since 2011, but after a series of failures and a lost presidential election, the DNC is preparing to advance its data sharing capabilities.
Exactly is Eric Schmidt's plan with this crew of political stat jockeys?
Well, I think Schmidt was actually an important behind-the-scenes advisor for the Obama campaign. He helped recruit talent. He helped serve as an executive coach to the campaign's manager. And during the campaign, he got to know the data analytics team, which was really the innovative piece of Obama's campaign. And instead of doing what campaigns traditionally do and trying to appeal to broad demographic groups like soccer moms, these guys unified vast commercial and political databases, managed to target individual voters. And if you think about it, that has important implications and possibilities for the private sector.
This is what I mean about folks not being focused. First of all, hold up.
Yeah, I like the quote that you have in your story where Eric Schmidt calls them people scientists and his plan to apply that to his world, the business world.
Exactly. What was so interesting about the Obama campaign was they basically were able to discover the individual proclivities of millions and millions and millions of voters. And so their campaign was much more efficient than previous campaigns had did, and that helps to explain Obama's huge 5 million vote margin of victory.
The country has changed, is changing in waves. And what last night taught us is that the party that knows how to ride those waves wins.
Now has enough electoral votes, more than 270, more than enough to become the 44th President of the United States. He will be the first African-American President of the United States.
So if you think about it, traditional marketing has a lot of the same shortcomings as traditional campaigns. You can't appeal to everybody. But Schmidt thinks that through this use of big data, you will be able to apply to anybody, and the businesses are going to want to line up to hire this new company.
And this new company is called Civics Analytics. What do we know about it so far? Who are their clients?
Well, Civics Analytics is led by Dan Wagner, who is Obama's chief analytics officer. Schmidt is a sole investor, and the company right now is constituted of about 24 veterans of the data analytics team.
Civics Analytics got its start in politics, actually. I spent 6 years beginning in Iowa and ending in Chicago, working as the chief analytics officer for the 2012 Obama campaign. And after that was over, I partnered with Eric Schmidt from Google to get initial seed financing to start the company. Our company started really as a consulting company. The transition that we've gone through is essentially building the software that helps people build a robust scientific truth with their data and then helps their teams guide their business process at scale.
And Schmidt sees a lot of possibilities for them, especially with mid-sized companies. They're going to want to work on things like efficiencies and just doing a better job of serving clients and reaching customers.
And Josh, last question here. Are they still going to be working for the president, or could the president tap them sometime in the future?
Well, probably not for the president because he's not running again, but they are going to be working, Wagner told me, for Democratic politicians probably as soon as this election cycle. So that could potentially put off some clients if they come to be identified as an extension of the Democratic Party.
Tonight, part one of a two-night special.
We face a number of important issues around privacy, safety, and democracy.
Frontline investigates Facebook.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and it was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
Told by company insiders.
It's possible that we haven't been as fast as we think. We've been too slow to act.
We didn't see it fast.
I think we were too slow.
And former employees.
I mean, everybody was pretty upset that we hadn't caught it during the election.
How Facebook was used to disrupt democracy around the globe.
I don't think any of us, Mark included, appreciated how much of an effect we might have had.
Correspondent James Jacoby takes a hard look at the man who wanted to connect the world.
Is he not recognizing the importance of his platform?
He didn't understand what he had built.
But is he accountable for helping divide it?
There is something wrong systemically with the Facebook algorithms. That polarization was the key to the model.
But there's a lot of admiration, I think, for what that campaign accomplished among Democrats, Republicans, and business leaders. So I think it's going to be interesting and kind of exciting to see what the applications are for this kind of big data analytics in the private sector.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
A story published today for Wired magazine goes inside the party's efforts. Wired senior writer and CBS contributor Issy Lepowski wrote that story, and she is joining us now. Good to see you, Issy. So when we talk about the DNC's data storage capabilities, what kind of information is being stored?
Oh, everything you can imagine. The entire voter file from across the country. This is every voter and a record of whether they voted in the past. It's also all of the field data that the people who knock on your doors are collecting, the people who call you are collecting, and it's all the commercial data that these campaigns have collected. All the information on, what kind of car you drive and other things that might tell a campaign, who you are, maybe your gender, your economic status. All of that is funneled into this data warehouse. And in the past, they had set up this warehouse that really wasn't capable of holding all of that data or withstanding the pull on it from data analysts across the country.
So what specifically, you're talking about Vertica, I guess. What specifically was the problem with Vertica?
Well, Vertica really predated a lot of the cloud-based systems that we hear about today. The systems that can sort of expand to, unthinkable sizes. The Vertica system required the DNC to actually set up its own hardware, its own servers. And these servers just weren't made for the quantity of data that we see in the year 2018. Remember, this was all set up in 2011 for the Obama campaign when data-driven campaigning was still a sort of novel idea. Today, it's table stakes, and campaigns up and down the ballot are trying to pull and push a lot of data into this system, and it just wasn't working. It would shut down. The days before the election, when everybody from the national campaigns to the small down ballot campaigns are trying to pull that data, I heard stories about it shutting down for 3 days at a time sometimes, and this was just a really big waste of resources that a lot of Democratic candidates feel handicapped them in 2016.
The failed launch of an app during this week's Iowa caucus has caused concerns about the integration of new technologies in future elections. But for years, Get Out the Vote, better known as GOTV, has used technology to find innovative ways to target potential voters in an effort to increase turnout. CNET senior producer Dan Patterson joins me now to talk about this. Dan, thanks very much for being with us. What exactly is GOTV and how is it used?
All right, Elaine, if you're a political nerd, GOTV is really exciting. If you're like everyone else, it sounds like jargon.
Yeah.
Except if you live in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Florida, Nevada, or like the rest of the United States, GOTV is really important because it is effectively advertising that targets you with one specific purpose, and that is to get out the vote, to persuade you, to convince you, just like a product might, to persuade you and convince you to vote or caucus for a particular candidate.
Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
Bernie Madoff, Ken Lay, Dennis Kozlowski, criminals, gluttons of greed, and the evil genius who towered over them. One man has the guts to speak his name.
Big Bird, Big Bird, Big Bird.
It's me, Big Bird.
Big, yellow, a menace to our economy. Mitt Romney knows it's not Wall Street you have to worry about, it's Sesame Street.
I'm going to stop the subsidy to PBS.
Mitt Romney taking on our enemies.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous.
New controversy over some old remarks ahead of Thursday's first debate between Presidents Biden and Trump. The fact-checking site Snopes finally debunking Democrats' claims that then-President Trump in 2017 called neo-Nazis and white nationalists, quote, very fine people. This was after a deadly protest in Charlottesville, Virginia, over the removal of a Confederate statue. Snopes now labeling that claim false, writing, quote, in a news conference after the rally, Trump did say there were very fine people on both sides, referring to the protesters and the counter-protesters. He said in the same statement he wasn't talking about neo-Nazis and white nationalists, who he said should be condemned totally.
Like when he said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville.
we heard, quote, there were very fine people on both sides.
Mr. Vice President, are you aware that you're misquoting Donald Trump in Charlottesville? He never called neo-Nazis very fine people?
No, he called all those folks that walked out of that, they were neo-Nazis, shouting hate, their veins bulging.
But he said specifically that he was condemning them.
Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
Why is Scopes finally correcting this record 7 years later?
It's a great question. It was very curious to me when I saw it over the weekend, and it got to me. There's a few things at play here. First of all, technically, I guess when I really tried to dig in and say, why is this being done right now? There was a viral X post by someone named Sean McGuire, who's a partner at Sequoia, a San Francisco-based Silicon Valley venture capital firm, who recently announced about 3 weeks ago that he was going to be donating to President Trump, supporting President Trump, and laid it all out. And then last week, he shared this video and said, for the first time ever, I actually watched the context and realized I had it completely wrong. And people started saying, well, no, you didn't. Yes, you did. And so that kind of is the context here. But I think it's really interesting because, as you mentioned, this has become a massive talking point. It's become a massive talking point within the media more broadly, but also certainly among the Democratic establishment and Joe Biden himself, who I would imagine, if we had to just place bets on it, will make this mention of President Trump said that that neo-Nazis and white supremacists were very fine people during the Thursday debate. I would bet that happens. But now we know. I mean, I have to say, I watched the context years ago, 7 years ago, so I knew that this was about protesters and counter-protesters as it related to statues of Robert E. Lee or statues of George Washington. That was the conversation that was happening then. But that is very interesting because now he has a very reputable fact-checking site that says it's false. That is a false claim, a lie, if he then goes and says that during the debate. It reminded me a little bit of this idea that President Biden has said multiple times also about President Trump, that he told you to drink bleach or to inject bleach, or, I mean, you go look back at the context, the word bleach was never even mentioned at all. A lot more, maybe we can go about, that could be the next segment we do. But these little snippets become talking points and they become the norm because, and it's really unfortunate, most people are not like you and I, and not like President Biden. They're not news junkies. They're not consuming the news on a regular basis. So maybe they catch little moments and they believe that is true because that's what they find in these little snippets, whether it's a campaign ad or whether they see it on some other less reputable media news source than this one. And so I think that it is an important moment right now to step back and say, if you believe that this was true, if you believe that this is what he actually said, well, now you know it's not. And let's just think about, maybe we should look at the nuance, look into a little bit more context on a lot of the things that we just accept as true when it comes to things that are really politically charged.
So when we hear GOTV, what we should be thinking of are the door knockers, the people who canvass and take down our opinions. They might be the robocalls. We might see direct mail come to our house. Those are all examples of GOTV that almost everyone watching has experienced at one point or another.
So we know about those methods. When did things become so high-tech in this world of GOTV?
Yeah, so this is when things get really exciting. As we know, tech is kind of incremental and it creeps into our lives in different ways. But political experts really look at the Obama 2008 campaign as a marker for when GOTV, in terms of data and technology,
the Obama coalition's growing by leaps and bounds. Latinos, for the first time, are now 10% of the electorate. Obama won them big time. More than twice as many unmarried women backed Obama over Romney, also a growing sector of the vote. And the president once again got huge support from young people.
So what are Democrats hoping the new data warehouse is going to be able to do that Vertica couldn't do?
Well, for starters, they'll be able to use it at crunch time when they need it. And that is sort of first and foremost. They need a stable database that they actually can look at to query who should we be targeting, who's voting early, all those kinds of crucial questions in the days before a campaign. But beyond that, because it's a more stable database, they hope that they can do more with, for instance, digital data. This hasn't been something that traditionally Democrats have been great at doing. They look at the voter file, they look at door knocks, they look at phone calls, but think about all the rich data that's coming out from Facebook and Twitter and what you can learn about how people are behaving online. Democrats and Republicans, frankly, are trying to figure out what it all means. And so with a more stable database, the Democrats hope that they can funnel out a lot more of that data in there. There are also new technologies like text-based systems, and Democrats want to figure out a way to really utilize that new data that they're getting in.
Yeah, I think it was. They watched CBS, they tracked CBS, ABC, and NBC. CBS was actually the most fair and balanced out of the three. I think it had a score in the 70s, and what they scored was, is it balanced? Is there the other side ever being shown? Is the anchor ever giving the benefit of the doubt? Are they saying something positive, or is it just all negative? On Kamala Harris, it was 100% positive coverage. 100%.
It wasn't 110% positive.
No, you're right. It could have been worse.
It could have been. Well, no, actually,
worse.
it can't be. That is unbelievable.
So here it is. No, actually, NBC was best. 71% with NBC.
71% positive is the best.
Positive, yeah.
The best number.
The best number is 100%.
No, but I'm saying.
Oh yeah, for
fairness. Yeah, the best one was 71% positive.
71%. Then 94% for CBS. ABC 100%.
And what's the time period on this? They didn't say one negative thing.
Yeah, since she became the candidate.
Oh my.
Yeah,
that's over a month.
I know.
50 days now.
Yeah, 100%. Now Trump's negative coverage, 77% on CBS, 86% on ABC.
These are terrible.
But nobody even came close.
I mean, think about that.
100%.
I have to.
Once again, one of the most searched, if not one of the biggest names searched tonight. I know that you had some problems that you are contesting. Google did not treat you fairly after the last debate.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Look, in the first debate, I was on the first night and I was the most searched candidate of that event. Unfortunately, Google chose to arbitrarily block our Google Ads account for several hours at the time that was most critical for our campaign. I'm suing Google for taking that action. They've provided no valid explanation for why that was done. There was no wrongdoing or problem on our part, not because of me, but because of this monopoly, this power that these big tech monopolies have to simply shut out people arbitrarily. This is a threat to our freedom of speech. And it's an important thing for us all to stand united in calling out and to protect, because whether you're a Democrat or Republican or on the left or on the right, for a big tech monopoly to have this power, this affects all of us.
Well, and this is a complaint we've heard from a lot of conservative outlets and groups who say that there are other social media outlets, including Google, who don't treat them fairly. It sounds like you're making the same assertion from the other side.
I am. And I think one of the problems is that we're seeing is that people seem to feel like this is a left-right issue rather than seeing it for what it is, which is a free speech issue, and how dangerous it is that you have these big tech monopolies like Google and Facebook that literally have the power through their algorithms and the things that they choose to do or the people they choose to shut out to influence our fair elections. This is what's at the heart of the action that I'm taking, and I'm taking it on behalf of the American people.
Growing questions and criticism swirled around Facebook in the United States and Britain today as officials questioned how data was used to influence elections. The British-based research firm Cambridge Analytica has been accused of harvesting data from more than 50 million Facebook users starting in 2014 and misleading Facebook about it. Through an outside researcher, Cambridge Analytica paid Facebook users to take a personality quiz and download an app that collected information from their profiles and their Facebook friends. Today, Britain's Channel 4 News broadcast exclusive secretly filmed video of Alexander Nix, the firm's now suspended CEO, discussing their work.
We did all the research, all the data, all the analytics, all the targeting. We ran all the digital campaign, the television campaign, and our data informed all the strategy.
In another video, Nix belittled the House Intelligence Committee members he met with in 2017.
I went to speak to one, and the Republicans asked 3 questions. 5 minutes, done. And the Democrats asked 2 hours of questions.
And you have to answer everything?
No, it's voluntary, but I did because I'm trying to help them.
Right.
We have no secrets.
Right.
They're politicians, they're not technical.
Right.
They don't understand how it works. They don't understand because the candidate is never involved. He's told what to do by the campaign team.
The furor began over the weekend after a former Cambridge Analytica employee, Chris Wiley, said the company used the information to influence voters' behavior. Yesterday, he spoke with NBC News' Today program.
This data was used to create profiling algorithms that would allow us to explore mental vulnerabilities of people and then map out ways to inject information into different streams or channels of content online so that people started to see things all over the place that may or may not have been true.
The New York Times reported that for as long as 2 years, Facebook failed to inform users whose data had been taken. Facebook has pushed back, saying the claim that this is a data breach is completely false. The company said that users chose to share the information. It's also hired auditors to make sure that the data has been destroyed as Cambridge Analytica promised. In now deleted tweets, the company's chief security officer, Alex Stamos, admitted a researcher lied about how the data would be used.
We've never seen this much money flow into U.S. elections. And in recent years, big donors like Ken Griffin, George Soros, and Reid Hoffman have contributed to swing election outcomes. So how much is being raised? Where does that money go? And can that make or break an election? What are the consequences of so much money flowing into elections?
He's one of the richest men in the world. He's given away a staggering $32 billion. But is the billionaire philanthropist George Soros at the heart of a global conspiracy?
I fear we could be looking at the biggest level of international political collusion in history.
Called globalists.
Usually, candidates who spend more money win their races. In 2022, nearly 94% of House candidates who raised the most money won their races. And for the Senate races that year, roughly 82% of Senate candidates who raised the most money won their races. But for presidential campaigns, things are a bit different. For example, in 2016, Hillary Clinton raised more money than Donald Trump, but she lost the election. So there's not always a clear correlation between how much is raised and who actually wins the election. The campaign money goes towards everything, including hosting rallies, to opening offices and hiring staff in swing states, and to consulting fees. But the biggest thing would be advertising, whether it's direct mail, whether it's television, radio advertisements, and also social media ads. Candidates are trying to figure out a way to reach voters, and they will use whatever methods that they can in order to do that. Fundraising is a critical part of any presidential campaign. The most prominent example of this is after Biden's disastrous debate in June, which left many Democrats fretting and nervous.
You raise a deficit larger than any president has in any one term.
You had the actor George Clooney, who asked Biden to step aside. You had major Democratic donor, such as Abigail Disney, who said that she wouldn't donate money to the campaign any longer if Biden was a nominee. For them not to contribute money meant that the campaign was going to struggle. Once people saw that basically the faucet was turning off, that really influenced the campaign, and it likely contributed to Biden exiting the race.
It was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. You'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say, why did so, and I thought it'd be...
There are 3 ways that money can be donated, whether it's individual contributions or through PACs or through super PACs. Individual contributions are subject to strict limits under federal law. Individuals can only contribute up to $6,600 for an election cycle. And then you have PACs, political action committees. They contribute money to campaigns and they can be formed for businesses or organizations. There's a $5,000 limit for individual candidate committee. And then you have super PACs, which you can accept unlimited contributions from individuals and corporations. They can have a huge impact on American elections. Wealthy donors are increasingly playing a huge role in shaping American politics. In the 2022 midterm election cycle, billionaires contributed about $880 million. But small dollar donations are also an important part of elections, and we're seeing that play out in the presidential race. The influx of money to campaigns is often uneven, and big events can influence how people donate to campaigns. For example, when Vice President Kamala Harris announced her candidacy for president after President Joe Biden stepped aside, she raised about $81 million within 24 hours from 880,000 people. That's a huge figure, and that's unprecedented. Trump's legal issues have also caused an influx of money to his GOP presidential campaign. In May 2024, Trump and his ally Super PAC raised $140 million, and much of that money came after he was convicted of 34 felony counts.
This was a disgrace.
There's money coming into these campaigns from all across the country, but a few players could have a huge impact on the upcoming election. For example, George Soros gave $60 million through a nonprofit that he founded to the Democracy PAC in April 2024. That money is going to go to aid House and Senate Democratic candidates. And this isn't the first time that George Soros has done this. He's been a prolific donor for a long time. In the 2022 midterm cycle alone, Soros gave
2020, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by a seemingly huge margin, 306 electoral college votes to 232. But let me show you how shaky that lead really was. 16 of those votes in Georgia that went to Biden, look how that race went. 2.47 million to 2.46 million. That's a difference of just 11,779 votes. Meaning, if half that number, 5,890 people, switched from Biden to Trump, all 16 of those electoral college votes would have gone to Trump as well. And this gets crazier. Arizona was similar, razor-thin margins. Biden won by 10,457 votes. So, if 5,229 of those people decided to change their mind, Trump would have taken all of Arizona's 11 electoral college votes. Finally, look at Wisconsin. Biden won by almost 21,000 votes. If 10,342 Biden supporters changed their votes to Trump, Wisconsin's 10 electoral college votes would have gone to Trump as well. So what's the point of this mental math? Well, if those roughly 20,000 people across 3 states changed their votes, handing Trump those 37 electoral college votes, suddenly we end up in the absurd and almost unprecedented outcome of a perfect tie. 269 to 269. What happens in a tie? The House of Representatives decides who wins. And it gets a little complicated, but one possible outcome of that vote is that Donald Trump becomes president for a second term. All thanks to 21,461 voters in a country of more than 330 million people. That, my friends, is swing state math. And it's why Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have spent so much time in the 7 battleground states.
Hello, Pennsylvania. How are we doing in Pennsylvania?
I thank you, North Carolina. We're going to get this done.
Is that Americans have tended to vote for change when we're in the midst of a crisis that appears to be ongoing. There are a couple of exceptions to this rule, and that tends to come in the midst of wars. But during economic crisis, especially, that seems to cast question on the leadership of the incumbent president.
It's called weather modification, or cloud seeding.
We can't create a cloud. There has to be an existing storm system.
We just give it a bump.
Yeah.
Hurricane Helene's wake, devastation and destruction stretching as far as the eye can see. Category 4 storm causing damage in at least 10 states. Hardest hit, North Carolina, where every single county has been impacted.
And we're dealing with a situation that is unlike
anybody's ever seen.
The town of Asheville isolated, cut off from power, water, and cell service. Homes and businesses.
An unprecedented storm, and it's causing us to have an unprecedented response.
This is the city of Asheville in the western mountains of North Carolina, 2,000 feet above sea level and hundreds of miles away from the nearest coastline. But such was the force of Hurricane Helene that nowhere in its path was safe. As many as 600 people are still on the missing list as search teams fan out across the state, navigating the worst flooding to hit the region in a century, with thousands of downed trees, power and mobile outages, and hundreds of closed roads.
It's indescribable. I don't know, it just was covered in litter and trees and mud, and it's stinky, and it was all the way up the street up here. It just looked like the bottom of a river.
And this is the surface of Lake Lure, an hour below the mountains of Asheville, now an apocalyptic stew of rubble and debris after Helene ripped through the state, unleashing torrential downpours and catastrophic mudslides, killing 47 in North Carolina alone so far, and more than 115 in total since last Thursday. That's when Helene first made landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast as the most powerful hurricane, a Category 4, ever to hit the so-called Big Bend region, before tearing northeast through Georgia, the Carolinas and Tennessee. Homes were swept away in the storm that had been a Category 1 just the day before, but in a now all too familiar tale, Helene picked up massive amounts of energy from the unusually warm Gulf waters, exacerbated, scientists say, by climate change. The result was a 350-mile wide, devastating storm with wind speeds up to 140 miles an hour at their peak.
Have you reached out to President Biden about federal relief efforts?
No, I haven't reached out to him. No, Valdosta has been ravaged. The town is very badly hurting, and many thousands are without power. They're running low on food and fuel. We brought a lot of it down with us. As you know, our country is in the final weeks of a hard-fought national election. But in a time like this, when a crisis hits, when our fellow citizens cry out in need, none of that matters. We're not talking about politics now. We have to all get together and get this solved. We need a lot of help. They have to have a lot of help down here. We look out for one another. We pull together. We pitch in. We persevere, and we pull it through. That is really the American spirit. That's what made America originally great.
Thank you, Mr. President, for coming and helping to put a spotlight on this city, this state, in this region that has lost so much. Thank you. May God bless you, Mr. President.